At exactly 1:47 in the morning, the glowing blue ring of the security camera, mounted on the front porch, flickered and died. The homeowner inside was completely unaware that the single piece of technology connecting her quiet residence to the outside world had just been severed by an unseen presence standing mere inches from the front door. We live in an era where we believe our homes are digital fortresses guarded by lenses and sensors that stream our safety directly to our cellular phones. We trust these devices to record every passing shadow and alert us to any approaching danger. But the person standing on that porch understood the fatal flaw in residential security systems. They require a constant stream of power and an unbroken wireless connection to function. By severing that connection, the intruder believed they had plunged the property into absolute darkness and erased any visual evidence of their arrival. They thought the sudden loss of signal would simply register as a routine network error or a brief power fluctuation. They were wrong. What the intruder did not realize is that modern security infrastructure operates on a continuous loop of data transmission where packets of information are constantly pushed to remote cloud servers. Even in the milliseconds before a device is violently taken offline, this residual data floating in the digital ether long after the physical hardware is destroyed becomes the ultimate silent witness. The internet is full of theories, but here we only follow the evidence. So to see how digital footprints are solving the most complex crimes, hit subscribe to Evidence with John. The target inside that house was not a wealthy tech executive or a controversial public figure, but an 84-year-old woman named Nancy Guthrie. Nancy lived a remarkably quiet and private life in the Catalina foothills, which made the sudden and violently calculated intrusion all the more anomalous. She was a woman whose daily existence was heavily dictated by severe physical frailties and a strict medical regimen. She relied on a surgically implanted pacemaker to keep her heart beating in a steady rhythm, and her mobility was significantly restricted, requiring careful assistance for basic navigation. Her survival depended entirely on a meticulously organized schedule of prescription medications that she could not afford to miss for even a single day. Yet, despite her fragile state, she carried an invisible weight of immense target value due to her direct biological connection to a highly visible public figure. Nancy is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, a prominent national television broadcaster. This stark contrast between her vulnerable, isolated physical reality and her family's massive media profile created a unique and dangerous dynamic. It is a dynamic that investigators look for when trying to understand why a specific home is chosen out of thousands of others in a quiet neighborhood. The necessity of her pacemaker and her daily pills established a terrifying biological ticking clock for anyone who might intend to take her away from that controlled environment. An 84-year-old cardiac patient cannot simply be relocated and kept hidden without immediate and sophisticated medical intervention. Knowing this physical reality makes the events of January 31st even more chilling. That evening, the family gathered for a quiet dinner, completely oblivious to the threat waiting in the shadows. At 9:50 in the evening, Nancy was driven back to her residence by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. He carefully pulled into the driveway and ensured she was safely inside the house. He watched as the heavy mechanical garage door rolled down and sealed shut, locking into place with a definitive thud. Tommaso drove away, believing that the electronic security system and the locked doors provided an impenetrable barrier around a vulnerable elderly woman. He trusted the technology to keep her safe. But digital sensors and cameras only look outward, and they possess critical blind spots that a patient predator can exploit. The electronic seal of the house was an illusion. The next day was February 1st, and the quiet morning stretched into the afternoon with a growing and unsettling silence. Nancy had a strict Sunday routine that included logging onto her computer to attend a digital church service with her congregation. When noon arrived and her digital presence failed to register online, her family immediately felt a cold wave of dread. This absence was a massive deviation from her established behavioral baseline. Concerned relatives drove to the Catalina foothills property to check on her well-being. When they arrived, the illusion of the secure fortress was instantly shattered. The back door of the residence was standing wide open, exposing the quiet interior to the outside elements. As the family rushed inside, they found a scene frozen in a state of chaotic interruption. Nancy was nowhere to be found, but the most terrifying discoveries were the items left behind on the counters and tables. Her cellular phone, her purse, and most importantly, her daily life-saving medications were all sitting untouched. The family immediately dialed 911, initiating a massive emergency response. Local law enforcement arrived and secured the perimeter while the family waited in agonizing panic. The Pima County Sheriff officially and publicly cleared the entire family of any involvement, eliminating the closest inner circle from the suspect list. The scene presented a baffling contradiction to the investigators. An elderly woman who struggled to walk had vanished into thin air, but her valuables remained entirely undisturbed. This was clearly not a burglary gone wrong. It was a targeted extraction. But why would someone orchestrate a complex home invasion to take a fragile 84-year-old woman who required a pacemaker, yet deliberately leave behind the very medication required to keep her alive? The answer to that question would soon emerge from the concrete steps outside. As crime scene technicians meticulously combed the property, they found something that instantly elevated the investigation from a missing persons case to a violent crime. A distinct pattern of blood was discovered stained into the concrete of the front porch. The fluid was carefully swabbed, collected into sterile vials, and rushed to a forensic laboratory for rapid sequence testing. The results came back with terrifying speed, confirming that the DNA profile matched Nancy Guthrie. The presence of her blood outside the home indicated a physical struggle, a violent altercation that tore her away from the safety of her residence. Investigators immediately cross-referenced this physical forensic discovery with the digital logs retrieved from the home's router. The timeline aligned with devastating precision. The exact moment the blood was likely spilled coincided perfectly with 1:47 in the morning, the exact minute the security camera was forcefully disconnected. This was no longer a case of a senior citizen wandering off into the night due to medical confusion. The blood and the severed data connection painted a clear and terrifying picture of a premeditated strike executed by someone who knew exactly how to dismantle the home's primary line of digital defense. The intruder had waited until the dead of night, bypassed the locked doors, and engaged in a physical confrontation that left physical evidence on the concrete. If you appreciate deep forensic breakdowns that rely on verified evidence rather than internet rumors, make sure to like this video so we can continue bringing you these detailed investigations. With the confirmation of a violent abduction, the local police requested immediate federal assistance, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially took jurisdiction over the case. The FBI deployed their specialized cyber response teams to tackle the digital silence left behind by the destroyed doorbell camera. They knew that the physical device was dead, but they also knew that Silicon Valley tech companies designed their cloud architecture to be incredibly resilient. Federal agents initiated a high-level collaboration with private technology partners, serving warrants to access the deepest back-end server logs associated with the victim's account. What followed was a painstaking process of digital archaeology. Engineers sifted through millions of fragmented data packets, attempting to piece together the final transmission sent by the camera before its power was cut. Their efforts paid off when they successfully reconstructed a corrupted video file, pulling an image directly from the digital ether. The recovered footage revealed a chilling phantom standing on the porch. The suspect was a male estimated to be between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average physical build. His face was completely obscured by a heavy mask intended to defeat facial recognition software. He was dressed in dark clothing designed to absorb the low ambient light of the neighborhood, but the most crucial details were the items he carried. The FBI analysis of the footage confirmed that the intruder was armed, elevating the threat assessment to the highest possible level. Furthermore, he was wearing a very specific piece of equipment strapped to his back. It was a black 25-liter backpack, specifically identified by forensic analysts as an Ozark Trail hiker pack. This single piece of consumer gear became the linchpin of the entire federal investigation. The FBI immediately launched a massive logistical operation to trace the commercial origins of that specific backpack. They began subpoenaing retail records from massive commercial chains analyzing thousands of credit card transactions and security camera feeds from sporting goods stores across the region. They were looking for anyone matching the physical description of the Phantom who had purchased that exact model of the Ozark Trail bag in the weeks leading up to the abduction. The digital net was being cast incredibly wide, pulling in terabytes of retail data to find a single point of intersection between the physical world and the digital footprint. As the agents dug deeper into the back-end systems of the security company, they uncovered another layer of data that threatened to completely upend their understanding of the timeline. The initial digital discovery plunged the federal agents into a labyrinth of conflicting electronic records that threatened to derail their entire operational timeline. As technicians scrubbed the server history associated with the residential address, they stumbled upon a deeply unsettling anomaly buried within the system logs. The back-end architecture registered a distinct motion trigger and a corresponding visual file dated January 11th. This was a full 20 days before the violent extraction occurred. The initial analysis of this file suggested a terrifying scenario where the masked figure had conducted a preliminary reconnaissance mission to test the perimeter defenses. National broadcasting networks quickly reported on this chilling development, painting a picture of a highly disciplined predator who had stalked the property for weeks. The implication was that the perpetrator had mapped the blind spots, calculated the response times, and meticulously planned the infiltration long before executing the strike. This trial run would have allowed the intruder to understand exactly how the motion sensors reacted to different angles of approach and to identify the optimal moment to sever the connection. The implications of a compromised digital perimeter forced the agents to question every piece of data they had collected so far. However, the certainty of this digital footprint began to crumble almost immediately. Within days, the corporation responsible for the hardware issued a stunning retraction regarding the January 11th file. They released an official statement clarifying that they could no longer confidently verify the accuracy of that specific timestamp. This sudden reversal introduced a massive complication into the federal probe. Was the date discrepancy simply a routine software glitch caused by a malfunctioning server, or did it point to something far more sinister? Investigators had to consider the terrifying possibility that the suspect possessed advanced cyber capabilities and had intentionally spoofed the network logs. Modifying the metadata of a cloud-based file requires a sophisticated understanding of digital architecture and network routing protocols. If the intruder manipulated the dates to confuse law enforcement, it elevated his profile from a violent local criminal to a technically proficient operative capable of waging a sophisticated counterintelligence campaign against the Bureau. This digital uncertainty created a paralyzing fog over the forensic timeline just as the situation took another chaotic turn. While federal analysts battled with corrupted timestamps, local and national news organizations began receiving a series of highly disturbing electronic communications. Anonymous senders were utilizing heavily encrypted email services to deliver explicit demands for financial compensation in exchange for the safe return of the missing woman. These messages were blasted across media channels, creating a public spectacle that threatened to overwhelm the command center. The media frenzy only served to embolden these anonymous actors, resulting in a flood of contradictory communications. The emails demanded massive cryptocurrency transfers, citing the high-profile status of the victims' relatives as justification for the exorbitant price. The senders used complex dark web routing networks to mask their true locations, bouncing their internet protocol addresses through various international servers to avoid detection by federal authorities. The sheer volume of these digital ransom notes created a massive bottleneck for cyber agents who were forced to track down the routing data of every single sender to verify their authenticity. The investigation was suddenly fractured, pulling vital resources away from the physical search to chase electronic ghosts across international borders. Every new message required a full forensic workup, draining hours of critical manpower. The public narrative quickly shifted to a traditional kidnapping for profit scenario, driven by the relentless cycle of televised news updates. Journalists camped outside the Kamei Center, broadcasting every new rumor regarding the financial demands and speculating on the potential negotiations. The pressure on the authorities to facilitate a transaction reached an absolute boiling point as the public demanded immediate action to save her life. But the seasoned behavioral profilers working deep inside the federal task force felt a deep and growing unease as they reviewed the contents of the messages. They understood that the internet provides a veil of absolute anonymity that inevitably attracts opportunistic actors during high-profile tragedies. As the profilers meticulously dissected the syntax, the tone, and the specific demands of the encrypted emails, they noticed a glaring and terrifying omission. The messages were filled with threats and financial instructions, but they lacked the one thing that gives a kidnapper leverage. Something fundamental was missing from every single one of these demands. A critical piece of the puzzle that is universally present in any legitimate hostage negotiation was completely and undeniably absent from the digital correspondence. Do you think the timestamp error was a genuine software malfunction or a deliberate act of digital sabotage by the intruder? The glaring omission in the mountain of digital demands was a concept known in law enforcement as proof of life. In any genuine abduction, for ransom, the perpetrators must establish credibility by proving they actually hold the victim and that the victim is still breathing. This is typically done through photographs, current newspapers, or specific answers to personal questions that only the captive would know. But out of all the encrypted messages flooding the media networks, not a single one provided a shred of verifiable proof that the senders had physical custody of the victim. The cruel reality of these hoaxes is that they inflict immeasurable psychological torture on a family already paralyzed by uncertainty. Every new email sparked a fleeting moment of hope that was immediately crushed by the cold analysis of federal cyber experts. Global news outlets reported that federal authorities began to systematically categorize the emails as cruel hoaxes. The Bureau officially assessed the communications as acts of opportunistic extortion perpetrated by internet scavengers looking to exploit a highly publicized tragedy for quick financial gain. These were digital con artists operating from thousands of miles away, completely disconnected from the physical reality of the crime scene. They used automated software to blast demands to hundreds of journalists, hoping that just one desperate relative would authorize a blind transfer of funds before the authorities could intervene. The realization that the ransom notes were entirely fraudulent triggered a massive paradigm shift within the overall investigation. The behavioral analysts had to completely discard the kidnapping for profit theory and reevaluate the core motive of the midnight strike. This is where the forensic timeline and the physical evidence collided to form a truly horrifying conclusion. The agents revisited the initial discoveries made inside the quiet residence on that fateful Sunday afternoon. They looked at the untouched pill bottles resting quietly on the kitchen counter and the violent struggle that left biological markers on the exterior, concrete. The narrative of a hostage negotiation fundamentally relies on the premise that the victim has immense value while still alive. But if the objective was to keep her stable enough to extract a massive payout from her prominent family, the masked intruder would have absolutely ensured she had her life saving. Cardiac prescriptions. The perpetrator clearly possessed the tactical awareness to bypass modern network security protocols and plan a stealth extraction in the dead of night. A criminal with that high level of meticulous preparation would not simply forget the most crucial medical supplies required to keep their high-value asset breathing during transit. The fact that the essential medication was deliberately abandoned while a violent physical altercation occurred on the threshold of the home pointed to a motive utterly devoid of financial negotiation. The fake ransom emails had successfully distracted the public and wasted valuable federal investigative resources, but they could not hide the grim reality of the physical evidence left behind. The absolute lack of any genuine proof of life, combined with the violently chaotic nature of the physical extraction, suggested that the perpetrator never intended to initiate a dialogue with the family at all. The terrifying truth was that the intruder did not see the elderly victim as a bargaining chip to be traded for untraceable cryptocurrency. The operation was not designed to facilitate a ransom exchange or a prolonged hostage situation. It was a targeted removal with a completely different and far darker objective in mind. This realization shifted the atmosphere inside the federal command center. From frantic negotiation preparation to a grim and heavily focused hunt for a predator who operated entirely outside the boundaries of traditional criminal logic. The case was no longer about tracking encrypted financial demands across the sprawling dark web. It was about finding a man who possessed the advanced technical skill to manipulate cloud architecture and the sheer physical ruthlessness to execute a violent strike against a highly vulnerable target. The illusion of a complex financial scheme was entirely shattered, leaving only the cold hard facts of the forensic evidence. The investigators were forced to confront the chilling reality that the motive was rooted in something far more personal or profoundly malicious than simple financial greed. The perpetrator had vanished into the unknown, leaving behind a confusing trail of digital artifacts, a permanently shattered sense of community security. The entire federal investigation had to immediately pivot, focusing entirely on the physical characteristics captured in the recovered video footage and the complex logistical requirements of carrying out such a brazen and meticulously planned attack. If you want to follow the ongoing forensic developments of this incredibly complex case, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update on the investigation. With the fraudulent ransom theories officially dismantled, the federal authorities launched one of the most intensive, coordinated manhunts in recent history. The Bureau mobilized resources across multiple states, issuing a nationwide alert for any information leading to the identification of the masked individual. To incentivize public cooperation and shatter the silence surrounding the crime, they authorized an unprecedented $1 million financial reward. This massive sum was designed to penetrate the criminal underworld and encourage anyone with even tangential knowledge of the operation to step forward. The strategy was clear. Someone somewhere recognized the specific gait, the posture, or the equipment utilized by the Phantom captured in the recovered data files. The investigative focus aggressively narrowed onto the single most identifiable piece of physical evidence derived from the cloud servers. The dark 25-liter pack became the absolute center of gravity for the entire forensic operation. Federal agents deployed advanced data mining techniques to sift through hundreds of thousands of retail transactions, attempting to isolate every individual who had purchased that specific model of consumer gear in the months leading up to the incident. They cross-referenced credit card receipts, loyalty program data, and localized security feeds from vast retail chains, hoping to find a single frame of unmasked surveillance footage. The scale of this logistical undertaking was staggering, requiring automated algorithms to filter out irrelevant purchases and flag suspicious activity patterns for human review. The goal was to build a comprehensive matrix of buyers and systematically eliminate them through rigorous alibi verification until only the perpetrator remained. Despite the deployment of overwhelming federal resources and the application of cutting-edge analytical tools, the physical reality of the situation remained agonizingly static. The digital footprints had provided a blurry image and a specific brand of equipment, but they had not provided a geographical coordinate. The technology could reconstruct the exact moment the perimeter was breached, and it could expose the fraudulent nature of the opportunistic extortion attempts, but it reached its absolute limit at the edge of the property line. Beyond the view of the severed lens, the trail dissolved into the vast expanse of the physical world. The authorities were left to comb through the desert terrain and coordinate with local jurisdictions, hoping for a physical breakthrough that could crack the case wide open. The massive reward generated thousands of tips, but each lead required exhaustive verification, often leading to frustrating dead ends. The sheer volume of information processing created a grueling marathon for the investigative teams who worked around the clock to analyze every possible connection. As the days turned into weeks, the silence from the digital realm became deafening. The residual data had spoken its piece, revealing the methods and the equipment of the intruder, but it could offer no further guidance. The case transitioned from a rapid response cyber crisis to a methodical and agonizingly slow physical search operation. The authorities mapped out vast search grids utilizing aerial assets and specialized ground teams to scour the surrounding landscape. They analyzed traffic patterns, cellular tower pings, and toll booth records, hoping to catch a glimpse of the suspect vehicle fleeing the area. The integration of advanced data analytics and traditional investigative shoe leather represented the absolute pinnacle of modern law enforcement capabilities. Yet, despite this monumental effort, the most critical piece of the puzzle remained entirely out of reach. The technology could illuminate the crime, but it could not reverse it. The algorithms could track a retail purchase, but they could not track a human life hidden away from the grid. The $1 million reward stands as a testament to the desperate ongoing effort to break the case, but it also highlights the limitations of the system. The federal agents have the image, they have the profile, and they have the logistical timeline of the strike. But the ultimate question, the only question that truly matters to the family and the public, remains painfully unanswered. The digital ghost vanished into the night, and the physical whereabouts of the victim are still completely unknown. What this specific case teaches us about the dangerous illusion of smart home security is profoundly disturbing. We operate under the false assumption that installing internet-connected lenses around our property creates an impenetrable barrier against physical threats. However, the forensic analysis of this intrusion demonstrates a critical vulnerability in our reliance on modern technology. These automated systems are ultimately tools of surveillance, not instruments of physical prevention. They can document a crime in high definition, but they possess zero capacity to physically stop a determined predator from breaching a doorway. Relying exclusively on digital monitoring while neglecting traditional physical hardening of a perimeter creates a catastrophic security flaw that sophisticated criminals will inevitably exploit. Furthermore, the investigation highlights the incredible forensic power of cloud-based architecture. The most crucial lesson derived from the recovered footage is the concept of residual data transmission. The perpetrator operated under the antiquated belief that destroying the physical hardware at the scene would successfully eliminate all visual evidence. He failed to understand that modern devices continuously push fragmented data packets to remote servers located hundreds of miles away. Even as the power supply is violently severed, the system manages to transmit the final crucial milliseconds of information into the digital ether. This invisible flow of data serves as an indestructible witness that cannot be silenced by physical force. The ability of cyber analysts to reconstruct corrupted files from these remote servers represents a massive leap in forensic capabilities. It proves that in the modern era of constant connectivity, true anonymity is practically impossible to maintain. Every interaction with a network device leaves a permanent trace, altering the landscape of criminal investigation forever and providing law enforcement with powerful new tools to pursue justice. The chilling silence of the digital logs since the exact moment of the violent abduction stands as a stark reminder that criminal methodology is evolving at an incredibly rapid pace. The perpetrators are actively learning to navigate the modern digital landscape, utilizing network vulnerabilities and exploiting the very smart systems designed to keep us perfectly safe. The individual who approached that front door possessed the tactical knowledge to plunge the quiet property into absolute darkness, but he ultimately underestimated the hidden resilience of the cloud. Who is the man hiding behind the heavy mask carrying that specific commercial gear? And will the exhaustive analysis of national retail transaction history be enough to finally expose an operative who has demonstrated such a terrifying ability to manipulate the digital environment? The massive investigation continues to push the absolute boundaries of forensic science as federal agents tirelessly work to transform those blurry, recovered pixels into a concrete physical identity. If you value verified evidence over internet speculation, subscribe to Evidence with John. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now to see exactly how federal investigators utilized advanced cellular tracking data to completely unravel the complex mystery behind our next fascinating case.